A very good Sunday morning to you. Welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee. I am Big Race Jim, Pass the Wire TV, Shore Bet Coffee, AmWager, Sunday morning after the Kentucky Derby. Hopefully, everybody enjoyed it. Uh, Exciting race. I feel like the last couple of years, we've been treated to some quality horse races in the Derby, right? Like last year, if you can't get excited about a three horse blanket photo finish, and then this year you have the top two horses, in my opinion, and I'll get a little braggadocious here in a few minutes, but the top two horses, in my opinion, hooking up at the eighth pole and giving us a little bit of a show down through the wire between journalism and sovereignty. Just excitement all around. I thought it was an excellent day of racing. Boss Sully getting nipped at the wire in that turf sprint just kind of ripped my heart out earlier in the day. But some overall really good performances. Excited to see Mind Frame come back. That was an impressive win. Little disappointing effort from Nisos, I thought, in that one. But when you're on the bench for as long as he is, even with the Hall of Famer in Bob Baffert training him back, kind of had to maybe expect that they needed to shake a little rust off. But overall, I thought the Derby was exciting, right? And I think outside of a couple of goofy things in the last couple of years, like a rich strike or mind that bird, um, even last year, if you look back in the form, Mystic Dan had the form to be a top contender, right? And it's, sure, it's easy to say that now after the fact, but if you looked hard enough, he fit in there. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do think one of those, one of those earlier Oaklawn preps that he was in, he popped a pretty decent figure that would make him competitive with the likes of Sierra Leone and Forever Young, and we saw that last year, and then this year, really, the race ran true to form. Right, we had the top two horses hook up there at the eighth pole, and they duked it out to the wire. Baeza, who everybody was super high on, I thought he ran spectacular. Final Gambit, who everybody was talking about as we'll call it long shot. And I think we all figured long shot like 30, 40 to 1, but he went off at 15 to 1, 12 to 1, something like that. So, but he was one of the ones that everybody was talking about as being a good late runner. So no surprise that the payouts were a little on the lighter side, but I do think the race shaped up pretty true to form. Take nothing away from journalism. Um, he just got beat, right? I think he just got beat by sovereignty. Sovereignty, just kind of moving like an absolute freight train. That was exciting to see. And really, I think a couple of key takeaways from me coming out of the race was, again, like I've said, those are the top two horses in the 3-year-old crop right now, journalism and sovereignty. I thought they were the top two horses coming in, and they confirmed that, they proved that yesterday at Churchill Downs. My dad, surprisingly, was very high on Owen Almighty, and I was not at all. Was not high on Owen Almighty at all. And we were talking the other night, and he was like, what if He said, "What if Owen Almighty just pulls a big brown from that that 20 hole and just takes them all the way around?" And I was like, Big Brown is like one of the best racehorses of the last, 30 years. There's no way Owen Almighty is Big Brown, but sure enough, he was right up in that mix going around that first turn. And I even said a few days ago to my dad, I said, there's no way he's in that first flight of horses. And he disagreed and included him in some supers and stuff. And he didn't make it in there to cash on those tickets. But around that first turn, we both looked at each other and in unison said, "Owen Almighty!" Like he was up there and he hung around, right? I thought he ran a really solid race. It'll be interesting to see how he does going back around one turn in some shorter races. Hopefully he came out of the race okay because I think he'll be a quality pick. Probably light on the odds and payouts, but I do think he'll be pretty tough later in the year, going through a lot of those one-turn sprints. I think he'll be super tough in those races. So good for him. That was a really impressive race for him. Burnham Square looked like he was in a really ideal spot. Like I thought he looked super comfortable down the backstretch, and as everything started to get moving around the turn, he just got pinched. BJ Hernandez had that that same spot where um, where he had Mystic Dan right on the rail, and he was going for it again and just got cut off and wasn't able to re-rally. And that's the interesting part of the Kentucky Derby to me. I was watching it again this morning, and that aerial view, you can see Burnham Square was trying to make that move, and it's so tough, right? I mean, these jockeys have so much going on, and you have to think and you have to time it just right in these races. Otherwise, you go too soon and you can hit that hole, but then maybe, you don't have enough gas then to get past the next flight of horses, and you kind of level off, and you're backing up in the stretch, or you wait too long and you get pinched like that. So, you know, it's tough, right? You have to time it right. You got to get a little lucky. And I thought Burnham Square was unlucky in the Derby. I'll be interested to see where he ends up next. Maybe the Belmont. That would be nice. I think he would. I think he'd be a strong contender in there, coming off of a race like that. Especially at a mile and a quarter too, right? We're not gonna. I don't think we're getting that mile and a half at Saratoga again for the Belmont. So Burnham Square would be one that I'd be interested in looking at if he does wind up in the Belmont Stakes in the next couple of weeks. Um, Other takeaways, Sandman, I felt like was a relative non-factor. Um, I think he finished fifth, but never really threatened much of anything, which you know I knew. Right, right. I was talking about that for weeks. Did not like that. Did not like that Arkansas Derby, um, and I don't really think anybody out of the Arkansas Derby um, did much of did much of anything as predicted. Who else was interesting? I thought, and I don't know if this is just like a race tactic or what, but Citizen Bull breaking and going, making basically a right turn to clear some space, I thought was pretty genius. And he cleared out some space off the rail and gave himself the opportunity to establish some position early. And I thought that was a pretty wise move, um, to do that, right? Because otherwise, everybody's coming over to kind of pinch you and bury you on the rail, and you have to go super, super quick. So swinging the other way and kind of creating your own lane, I thought established some nice early position for him, and they were just going too fast, and he wasn't able to sustain that, and started backing up, around the far turn, maybe even earlier. But I did think that that was a smart play from, was it Martin Garcia on there, I think, to just kind of clear out some space and give your horse a shot with some extra room rather than getting pinched. We talked about Owen Almighty getting all the way up there from the 20 spot. I thought Pratt on Baeza was, as good a ride in a third place effort as you'll see. I think, you know, Baeza was getting a lot of buzz going, getting in and whatnot, and I think he lived up to that sort of hype. And I thought that that was a really good ride that Pratt gave him. A couple other interesting things: the Japanese horses, total non-factors. Flying Mohawk, total non-factor. And like we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, if you look hard enough, it's easy to eliminate half the field right off the rip. American Promise, early pace setter, kind of in that first flight, but again, a relative non-factor. Um, so true to form, I thought the race played pretty true to form. And if you've been following the show the last couple of weeks, 2 weeks ago, I told you who my top 5 or 6 board hitters were. And I'm going to show them to you again. And hopefully you were listening and paying attention, because here it is. Rodriguez, Grande, both scratched. There was your Superfecta. I had it pegged right here on Past the Wire TV on Sunday Morning Coffee. Now, did I box all of those horses in the Superfecta, and what did it end up paying, like $1,700 for a dollar? No, I'll admit that I did not. I did not bet it that way. Not much of a super player anyway. Not really much of a trifecta player either, except on some of these big days like I was talking about last week, um, where you have a lot of inequity in these pools. I think there's just a lot of extra money, so you can be a little bit, personally, you can be a little bit looser with your wagering strategy, I think. And I like to play a bunch of different trifectas, and for me, it worked out. I had the trifecta a couple times for a dollar, so that was nice. But there you have it, right? Gave out the superfecta 2 weeks ago, so hopefully you've been paying attention. Hopefully you cashed on some tickets. I know John, going through that Thoroughgraph show, was pretty high on Sovereignty paired ones on the Thoroughgraph, which would suggest a forward move. I'll be curious to hear from John what that Thoroughgraph figure came back for Sovereignty, but you paired ones, so a forward move was expected, and even if he ran back to that one, would be a super strong contender. And again, I don't know what that figure came back at, but he definitely ran well enough to win. So um, all in all, a good weekend. Um, Coming through the last couple of weeks. Hopefully you've been paying attention, because there was a ton of great information. And yeah, we covered it. We covered it pretty good, right? There you had the Superfecta, John on talking about sovereignty on the Thoroughgraph show. Charles giving out some winners on his show. Um, so I think all in all a successful derby season, and then we'll go through and see what happens with the Preakness. But you got to kind of like Rodriguez, right? Going into there, being pointed to there now, as he wasn't able to make the Derby starting gate. He'll get a really long look for me, and we'll see who else decides to show up in there. But we'll take a quick timeout. We'll come back, recap, wrap up the Derby. I've got a couple of extra little thoughts and some information moving forward that I think will be good, and we'll cover that in the last sip. So stick around. Go.
It's simplification and Javier.
All right. So two things I want to talk about. Well, two and a half things I want to talk about: the Kentucky Derby and just the coverage of the Kentucky Derby. Like I was saying earlier, oftentimes the Derby and horse racing in general, oftentimes it runs pretty true to form. Sure, goofy things happen. You get, crazy long shots that come in, but for the most part, everything runs pretty true to form, and the Kentucky Derby is no different. And I think we get caught up a lot in 20 horses, big odds, like, Burnham Square, I thought was a top contender um, at double digit odds. Rodriguez, if he got in, double digit odds, let's say, top contender, right? So we have these horses. I think, shoot, even Sovereignty went off at 8 to 1. So we have these horses that have good form, legitimate contenders, and I think a lot of times we get caught up in all of that, like the potential of Final Gambit can run on and win. We thought that maybe at 30, 40 to 1, it sounds a lot nicer than what he ended up going off at. Um, but a lot of times we get caught up in these large numbers, the potential for these large payouts, when in reality, if we just stick to the basics, I think we will be a lot more successful long term, right? Because these races, as we've seen, run pretty true to form. So we need to block out a lot of the noise, right? We need to shape and form our own opinions. Like I was talking about last week, where you had, arguably two of the most respected, most read, most watched, most listened to clockers and workout analysts saying complete opposite things about the same horse. And that's interesting to me, because if, we're watching, and I know most people here are watching horse racing throughout the year, and it's not just a Triple Crown hobby, but for the people who do watch this once a year, or look at workouts and look at those workout reports, clocker reports once a year or a couple times a year, it's tough to look at both of the two most respected, most followed workout analysts and see that they're both saying the opposite thing. So, not a knock on either one of them. Like, that's their opinion. And my point is that we have to shape our own opinion and we have to eliminate all of this different stuff that's going on. And we need to do our own homework, do our own research, do our own process, come up with our own process, come up with our own system, and find bits and pieces of things that we want to build into our system and follow that system and not let the excitement of long odds or something like that distract us, because there's just so much content, so much useless content out there around the Derby. We'll see about the Preakness, we'll see about the Belmont as well, and it's tough. And I think my main complaint then, piggybacking off of that point, is just the NBC coverage, like, it's not for us, right? If you're watching Sunday Morning Coffee presented by our good friends at Shorebet Coffee and AmWager on Past the Wire TV, you're not the audience that NBC is trying to appeal to, right? We're not their customer. Their customer is the person who watches the Derby every year and they don't ever watch horse racing after that, right? My dad pointed out yesterday, like, we don't even know how many minutes are to post in those undercard races because they're not showing it. They're giving you the odds, they're giving you a random pick as those horses are, basically loading into the gate. And the issue with that, I don't have the issue with that. The issue I have with NBC is that they black out the track feed everywhere else unless you want to sit in front of your computer or sit on your phone all day, or plug your laptop into the TV and watch the track feed through there. Like, I have the RTN, Racetrack Television Network subscription, and that was blacked out on the TV, which I think is unfair. Right? I don't think that's right for the horse players, because why is RTN blacked out, but the track feed through your phone, through your wagering app, why is that available, but RTN is not? I don't like that, and I think that needs to change, because I would much prefer to listen to the Churchill Downs in-house feed with their analysts who are actually talking about the racing. You can see the odds, you can see the minutes to post, you can see how the horses before the races are walking around, moving around. You don't get any of that on NBC. And I think that is a disservice and inconvenient for people like you and me who follow this sport regularly on a daily basis and want and need that information. And I wasn't going to sit with my laptop on my lap all day, and I wasn't going to sit with my phone, my nose buried in my phone all day watching the track feed through the wagering app. That's not convenient. That's just an annoyance that I had yesterday, as I was really stuck putting NBC on the TV and not getting the horse racing production that I wanted. Between every race, they're talking about Derby horses when there's 10 other quality stakes races, and plenty of good storylines, plenty of great horses to talk about, and they just ignore it. And you can't get that anywhere unless you're through your wagering app, which is just unfortunate. So there's my little complaint on that whole thing. But just again, before we go, 2 weeks ago I gave this out. Here's your Kentucky Derby board hitters as I saw it a couple of weeks ago. There's your Superfecta and the two extra horses in there scratched. So just going to toot my horn one more time before we head out of here. Thanks again to everybody for following along the last couple of weeks. If you haven't subscribed to Past the Wire TV here on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps myself, it helps John, helps Gio, helps Eddie C, helps Charles, helps the whole team. And if you haven't yet either, go to pastthewire.com, check out all of the photos from our two stellar photographers, Jenny Doyle and Courtney Snow, at pastthewire.com. They were at the Derby and at the Oaks, and just pumped out a ton of excellent content. So thanks to them, and go give them a couple of comments on the website, and show them that you appreciate their work. So thanks again. We'll be back next week as we look forward to the Preakness. We'll start to see who's going to shake out in that field, and should be fun all the way through the Triple Crown. So thanks again, and we'll see you guys next week. This is Sunday Morning Coffee on Past the Wire TV. I'm Big Race Jim. Shore Bet Coffee, AmWager. Thanks as always. Have an awesome week.
Go.